The plan was to continue with this article breaking down the Generation 6 Smogon bans. Problem: I might have stumbled into the deepest rabbit hole that exists for any one Pokemon in the entire franchise. There was so much more going on with Aegislash than people realized, and it's really crazy. Don't worry, we're going to talk about Mega Kangaskhan. We're going to go even deeper on this list. If you missed the first video, recommend checking it out. Description down below, YouTube card, all that fun stuff. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts down below. The Smogon history of bans and also just like competitive Pokemon performance is absolutely insane, and that's why you gotta share it with everyone. Watch the video. This kind of information needs to get out there. So, in that video, I said, hey, I remember a forum post about Aegislash that went into the ban logic, and it talked about like centralization and lack of autonomy and stuff, and I can't find it anymore. A lot of people sent me this. I found this. This isn't the article, unless it was like edited, but I don't think it was. Maybe it was like somewhere in this post and I lost it forever. Or maybe it seems like it might have actually been a different forum thread that got like taken down or is login only and it's kind of been lost to time. So kind of started here, but then in my search for the original Aegislash thread, I found this. It's actually the Pokemon X and Y ban history, which does things kind of weird. So this article did it in alphabetical order and not chronological order, so it kind of made talking about the decisions a little weird in the exact context. But then I found, you know, this right here where we actually have the direct ban history. So there were some quick bans, then we had Mega Lucario being the first test in February. After that, we had April for some swagger shenanigans, that got banned. We also had Baton Pass, that getting banned in June, taking quite a bit of time for the Baton Pass ban. And then August was when the Aegislash ban went through. Almost a year of this Pokemon bubbling up and creating problems for the Pokemon community, but just barely getting banned. And as I revealed in my last video, there were some shenanigans with the vote, that the ban decision was delayed as people were actually changing their votes. So it seems like it might have actually been rigged to get Aegislash banned, and then after that, Smogon just fell apart, became ban happy, and a complete joke. It was already a joke before, but I think all the problems with Smogon kind of go to the Aegislash decision and all the controversy around Aegislash being a ban-worthy Pokemon or not. And then the rabbit hole goes wild, but let's just kind of see what they had to say in this like quick little retrospective about it. Aegislash was one of the most dominating presences OU has ever seen. I've got a video coming up about Mega Lucario. Get ready for that. Big hype, notification, subscribe button. Also, a major announcement coming up for the month of August. And in that video, I kind of exposed how they just lied for their ban decisions, that what they said about Mega Lucario was just objectively false. So now we can actually see this. One of the most dominating presences with a 22% usage. This is 3-month usage stat for June 2014. Now, it was the most used Pokemon in OU, but we have seen many more Pokemon with much higher usage over the years that have not been banned. Landorus. So it just kind of shows that this doesn't really hold up. The unique combination of King's Shield, stance change made Aegislash a very effective pivot, wall breaker, sweeper, and everything in between. Steel Ghost defensive typing allowed it to check a boatload of different threats in OU, but then we just kind of get into the problem where Smogon players never want to adapt, they never want to properly team build, they just want to like play Stall and Landorus, and anything that threatens that must be removed from their game, reducing the viability of threats like Mega Gardevoir. Okay, like, I guess Mega Gardevoir losing to Aegislash is just that problematic. Mega Heracross tremendously, possessed a great deal of versatility in sets, and could also break cores very effectively, thanks to its tremendous offenses, that really aren't that tremendous, as we talked about in the last video. And then Shadow Ball, Sacred Sword, and Flash Cannon. I mean, Sacred Sword is only good for cutting through defenses, and then Mixed or Special Aegislash actually isn't that crazy, so yeah, sure. Found this random question on Pokemon DB. Why was Aegislash banned from competitive battling? Heard Aegislash has been banned from competitive. Is this true? Well, that's false. So remember, we do have to kind of like stumble back in time into Generation 6, where there were a lot of stupid players that thought Smogon was official. And this was also when Smogon was probably at its most toxic, its most aggressive, and just bullied players into conforming and playing its format. And that's also where a lot of it came from. Yeah, this is official, or it's the only competitive format, which is a lie. So Smogon elitism kind of going back into 2014, then having a lot of like weird trickle effects. Aegislash is an extremely effective Pokemon and has very high risk, high reward output. I remember reading somewhere that people said like medium risk, high reward. Like high risk, high reward doesn't sound bannable. Aegislash has multiple different sets that are all effective. I never believed in the special set. It has numerous sets, most of which are handled differently. If you guess the purpose wrong, you're often losing at least one Pokemon, as is true for much of competitive battling. That's kind of like the thing, when you actually break down Smogon ban logic, it all just falls apart towards like, yeah, that's Pokemon. That's exactly how Pokemon works, and this isn't breaking Pokemon and warping the game. It introduces literal arbitrary decisions, namely in the form of frequent 50-50s with King Shield. And this is the weird thing. I don't remember any 50-50 arguments from back in the time. I don't remember talking about it. I don't remember breaking it down. But it's not literal arbitrary decisions, and it's not 50-50s because win conditions come into play for prediction. Also, as I break down in the last video, kind of going over the ban logic and stuff, it really stopped making sense because a lot of the pride in Smogon is making switches and switch predictions and double switches, and that being the true pinnacle of skill in competitive battling is outplaying your opponent that hard with a switch or having the correct lead and protect setups and stuff. So now 50-50s are bad when you're just guessing on a switch, guessing on a King Shield versus a setup versus an attack. Unacceptable. And this just goes into all of my Smogon breakdowns over the years, that between two different ban decisions, you're going to find a lot of contradictions, just made up words, different applications of their made up definitions and stuff, and there's never any consistency, which is why the ban logic is so flawed. This is important because the 50-50 decision is not an even trade for the user and opponent. Well, that's why it's not a 50-50, which people seem to be arguing. Remember, King Shield makes Aegislash have 150 defenses, meaning the user has the 50-50 as well as 150 defenses. But Aegislash is also slow. So, like, you just Earthquake through it, or the opponent sets up, and then Aegislash doesn't have a proper response if it gets punked on the King Shield. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. Opponent only has a 50-50. A 50-50, 150 defenses, only a 50. My brain just kind of broke there for a bit. Yes, the user might guess wrong, and the opponent can set up, but this is a specific scenario and dependent on the 50-50. That is just word soup. That's NPCs back in 2014, before we knew what to call them. Just the cult broken brain mentality. I guess we did have an identification where it's just like you're regurgitating buzzwords and you don't even know what you're saying, but NPC is just so good. So yeah, like, again, arbitrary definitions of made-up words, and then you just keep saying that, and everyone's in the hive mind, so yep, that's why Aegislash needs to be banned. Clearly, obviously. Very understandable. Guessing between attacking or not attacking Aegislash has determined many high-level ladder matches. That's just Pokemon. That, especially now, where everything is Japanese anti-setup into like some of the craziest snowballing, we saw it in Generation 8. Butterfree was just outrageously powerful. If you bring in a slow tank, Butterfree is putting a sub, it's quiver dancing, it's baton passing, game is over. Maybe there's a mega for like extra status and field conditions or survivability. It also puts you to sleep and then like, yeah, game over, GG. But that was also very prevalent back in Generation 6. If anything, Generation 6 was kind of the most snowball-y generation of competitive Pokemon. Maybe Generation 7 as well, to where you actually used to see 6-0 hard sweeps back then. Actual competitive hard sweeps are almost unheard of in modern Pokemon, but also exposes some weirdness because Mega Pokemon were generally like frail sweeping Pokemon, so you could just set up against them with Dragon Dances or Shell Smashes and get your own 6-0 sweep in return. Like Barbaracle could do it, Cloyster could do it, Dragonite didn't run Encore or Fire Spin, so yeah, like you actually had just like whoever can get into the position for getting their 6-0 setup. Aegislash did that, many other Pokemon did it, this just isn't true about how much impact it had on the game. And there's no skill involved here. No skill in playing for a win condition. No skill in prediction, even though all of Smogon is I'm better than you because I got the double switch. It's simple, arbitrary guessing. Might as well pack up and, like, fold the entire organization then. Why play competitive Pokemon? Because the entire thing is arbitrary and guessing and RNG. Did the opponent just bring 6 Pokemon that happen to be better than your 6 Pokemon, or you brought 6 better than theirs? That's just an RNG element of weirdness inside of Pokemon. No team is perfect. Did you just arbitrarily pick a lead better than your opponent, or do you lose the game turn 1 because their lead counters your strategy so hard you just lose the game? All arbitrary. Never play Pokemon. Nothing's competitive. There is no gaining of information on the opponent to best predict a switch on something. These kids don't understand win conditions, or just like strategic play. It is literally just, here is a guess, make it, hope for the best. Aegislash forces the opponent to guess its set at the risk of losing a significant member. Welcome to all of Pokemon. So this goes back to my theory that Smogon just wants 10 viable Pokemon, all with the same movesets, and every battle's a handshake until you get the double switch prediction that wins the game. And then that obviously makes you the better Pokemon player. Everyone's in agreement. You don't get to see the moves, EVs, nature, and items of your opponent, so everything is just guessing on what item it has and what moveset it has. And that also just leads to a lot of 6-0s or like 3-0s on the battle stadium, regardless of the Pokemon. This is not an exclusive to Aegislash thing or exclusive to banned Pokemon thing, therefore they must be banned. Let's go deeper. This is a preview of its own video because I found the tiering policy framework for Smogon, and then that's where we can get into the definition of uncompetitive. So whenever that pops up in the ban logic, mostly for RNG stuff, but then it's all just like hypocrisy and contradiction. Elements that reduce the effect of player choice interaction. You mean Scald. And then all of this stuff, which often contradicts the actual ban logic, because we have battling skill. Making assumptions is part of the skill involved in battling, according to Smogon. That, like, you use your skill to understand what the opponent most likely wants to do, and there is going to be an element of guessing, but if you make a more informed assumption, or you can actually, like, critically think through it, that's actually battling skill. So yeah, I found this during the Aegislash rabbit hole, and we get to talk about that for its own video. Like, going back through the history of all this Smogon stuff is wild, because there's like endless content for a retrospective, but the overall result is Verlisify always right. But no, the Pokemon community continues to be toxic, slander, defame me, no one wants to stand up for me, even though I'm developing like the best competitive strategy, and no one has ever shown me to be wrong. But nah, Verlisify bad. Sadly, it's just the same NPC stuff as the actual ban logic. They only know hate with me, they've only been taught hate with me, but they don't have any arguments outside of that. And then things just get even weirder with Aegislash, because there's an article about the post-Aegislash metagame. That Aegislash was so overwhelming, so dominant, that it needs its own talk about its removal. You know, with the 22% usage. Maybe it peaked up to like 25% or something. Even then, no matter what, Aegislash was never more used than a lot of Pokemon that we see throughout the history of Smogon and even today. Where are we at today, boys? Oh, look at it. 42% on the Great Tusk, Dragapult, King Gambit, Golden Go, Samurott. Top 5, higher than the overwhelming presence of Aegislash that needs its own breakdown of what to do now that Aegislash is gone. The banning of Aegislash has had an enormous effect on the OU tier as the center of the tier. It's just nonsense regurgitated rhetoric. That it was the most important Pokemon. It was the most oppressive, overwhelming Pokemon. There's nothing you could do about it. Therefore, it was the center of the tier. And centralizing limited viability, centralizing effectiveness of many Pokemon that could otherwise be enormous threats. Okay, then you counterplay around Aegislash, and then you remove it. Now you have your enormous threat that the opponent isn't ready for. Or just develop the meta and team build and pull up Pokemon from lower tiers that actually stop Aegislash. This article details some of these improved Pokemon that you can capitalize on in the post-Aegislash OU metagame. That important of a Pokemon, it's just crazy. And then giving grades. You know what I gotta say though? Like, people actually cared about competitive Pokemon back then and would do these kinds of analyses. Now, Smogon generally being really wrong and having like false logic, but at least they tried. You know, no one's caring about Pokemon this much now with competitive Pokemon or anything. They're just all hacking and then like stealing hatch rental teams and not developing anything for themselves and not even trying to improve or trying to work things out about the game, except for me. But like, there was effort put in. And it, even though it's like weirdo stuff in retrospect, like, wow, yeah, pre-Aegislash Ban, B+, post-Aegislash Ban, A on Mega Metacham, and then like B+, A+, B+, A+, on the Terrakion and some other Pokemon. Unranked on the Jirachi, but restricted mythical, so we skip it. Starmie. It was in the... People made art! People made art about it. There's our boy Starmie. Honorable mentions. Look at all these Pokemon that get to exist now because Aegislash is gone. Wait, you just played Diet Aegislash because Aegislash was that powerful. But that's not the end of it. We have a case study for Aegislash that just keeps going and going and taking in all the arguments and going. Is it the end or is it? New world, looking to the future, conclusion. There is more discussion in this article about a single Pokemon than we have seen for entire seasons in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I don't know where to be, because that, in retrospect, the bans make even less sense than we thought and really aren't defensible, so I don't have respect there. But I feel a different kind of respect growing because they actually cared enough about Pokemon to even make, like, long-form misguided discussions. This is freaking stupid. My friend had been texting me. Now, remember, people would actually talk to each other about competitive Pokemon and engage. X and Y was truly the renaissance. Everyone cared in their own way and actually, like, tried to make Pokemon work for them. We haven't seen it since, which is really sad. They banned him from OU. I'm so done with Smogon right now. And we could really see the contention in the decision right there, that, you know, the vote might have been stolen, that it took so long for Aegislash to be too much of an overwhelming problem, and then it was kind of its own weird anchor inside the game, to where, like, after it was gone, people were like, yo, we have something to fill in here, and we have to, like, re-establish Pokemon if this was even the right decision. I think this is also further proof about my theory that it's where it went all wrong for Smogon, and then they just became ban-happy and a joke, and they burned off more people with every decision, and then, like, Generation 8, oh yeah, you ban the gimmick, so you're just kind of proving you're casual and bad at the game, and then Generation 9 has been complete nonsense, and you can kind of track it all the way. Now, I could go through this for the next hour, and we could really get even deeper into what went down with Aegislash, because this actually seems like a well-written and thought-out article in Smogon. I'm not going to take a side and advocate for or against it. Instead, I'm just here to share what led to the banning, what both sides argued, and what resulted from it. So even if it probably says, like, people said 50-50 or all these centralizing things and being too dominant and stuff, like, that's what I'm reading off of this. So that is what the people thought and said, regardless if it was accurate or not. So ban it with fire, over-centralizing, you know, perform too well against a variety of opponents. Aegislash could constantly force 50-50s with King's Shield, in quotations. So yeah, just kind of like saying, yo, this is what people were saying. And I didn't pick up on that. It's so weird. Like, this is the first time I'm hearing the 50-50 argument about Aegislash or any Pokemon, but again, contradiction and stuff. And then a lot saying about, no, stop, it doesn't need to be taken down, you know? +2 Shadow Sneak and hit it with a super effective stab attack from Landorus, Diggersby, Garchomp, Charizard Y, and Bisharp. And those were already common Pokemon. Yeah, so centralizing that you have these commonly used Pokemon that are in over 10% of teams that just naturally deal with Aegislash and are really easy to build with. Although he conceded that teams needed to carry checks against Aegislash, Alex Wolf told me that this applies to every single dominant Pokemon in OU, with Aegislash not even being the hardest of them to deal with. Yo, where was this? Where was this rationality in Smogon? Oh my god. In general, the arguments I heard from the pro-ban group were either really subjective or really ignorant. Bro, how did people hate me back in the day? It's just default. It's just, Verlis must be wrong, even though I was catching the good sentiment. But those videos were like overwhelmingly hated. That was one of those things where people are just like, that's like what cemented a lot. We're like, oh, Verlisify's only drama. This new kid is all about hate and controversy, and he just says things to rile people up. He doesn't believe in any of it. It started off of this, but I was right. And I was even like, and people agreed with me. I would hate Smogon less if there was actually reasonable people coming out of it and speaking up about this. Beating it is very much possible. Aegislash is nothing like Swagger. King's Shield uses as much probability as Protect, with the added vulnerability to moves such as Taunt. Also, you could, like, hit through it with status. So you had more options, and that also meant, like, you didn't have to completely cripple your team to run something to deal with Aegislash. Aegislash had many limitations that kept it balanced. And this is another really interesting thing, because modern Pokemon design for, like, Generation 8, Generation 9, even a little bit of Generation 7, like with the Ultra Beast and stuff, is that Pokemon are way overtuned, but have a very just hard stop weakness to the Pokemon. Aegislash was kind of the beta test for that, but now that that's just what Pokemon is, and there's still a lot of Pokemon being used today, with all the power creep and stuff that existed in Generation 6, it just kind of seems like, yeah, it's just underdeveloped. It's bad players that want their casual game mode where they're coddled and they just need everything to get banned because they don't want to deal with any problems. Which is what I was saying back then, dude. That's just the baby player format and they got mad, but I was just right. And then, you know, the new world. That multiple articles about the game without Aegislash because it was that insane. And then going back to this thread, even though I couldn't find the post that I used in my video, there's still like a lot of discussion around it where you can just see like nonsense. I mean, maybe there's just a couple reasonable people in Smogon and they also just kind of burned out of it from all the decisions. Or maybe like Aegislash, okay, they got offended by that, but overall, like eventually there were just too many bans or too many bad decisions. But then they never come around on Verlisify, so whatever. But yeah, like, why ban Aegislash? Here's why. It possesses a pseudo 720 BST. I mean, we talked about how you can just taunt it out of that, or do other things and severely weaken it. That's even higher than Cure MB. But I mean, like, if it doesn't KO you on the Shadow Sneak, it is the freest pickup. Aegislash has a great typing offensively and defensively. Ghost only has one resist, one immunity. King's Shield makes it impossible to trap outside of Bisharp, which can still be outsped and KO'd with a fast Sacred Sword set. While we're talking about King's Shield, 50-50 once again. And then just kind of like, boo-hoo, I'm bad and can't beat it, so ban. However, in my own personal opinion and experiences, I found that beating Aegislash has never proved to be a challenge at all. Maybe that's just me, though. And this is like kind of things I'd say. It's like, well, I also just haven't had a problem with it. Now, yeah, on the surface, that's not a good look. It's a weak argument to go, well, I never have a problem with it, therefore it's not a problem. But with Pokemon, you can kind of go deeper and make that argument make sense. And that was what I was getting at with a lot of my videos and like anti-Smogon ban logic at the time. That as a skilled player that understood the game, had really well-rounded team building, and also a good understanding of win conditions, both mine and my opponents, I didn't have any problems with any of the Pokemon that got banned. So when you kind of get to that point, it is skill issue. You are not a good enough player to play around certain Pokemon. And as we break down the ban logic, we can find that none of them warranted a ban. And it's also like goes into the tiering policy. Skill, team building skill, assessing and dealing with threats. Because we see that on the usage stat. It's not like, oh, once a Pokemon hits over 20% usage in OU, it gets banned. Because that would actually just like completely ruin everything, because there's always just going to be something that floats to the top. However, that's effectively what Smogon does in a weird way. They don't go by the raw usage stats. They just kind of go by emotions. This Pokemon makes me feel bad. Well, you remove that, there's just going to be a next Pokemon that makes you feel bad. And then you're just turboing through the entire meta and banning everything. Wow, it all started with Aegislash. Building towards a strategy or strategies. Creativity, which is weird because creativity is ignorance, according to the actual Smogon philosophy. And that's also another thing that people say. It's like, well, I don't want to have to be creative and build around this Pokemon, therefore ban it instead. But according to Smogon's own policy, it is an element of skill to have good team building and even creativity inside of that. So you are the more skillful player that finds less trouble with the common threats or the things that need to be banned. And then this contradiction and nonsense makes me lose respect for Smogon all over again. And posts like this. Comments like this always concern me, because in cases where the Pokemon isn't blatantly and obviously broken, so going back to elitism philosophy about Smogon, great. They're the skilled players, they know better than you, therefore they can identify the obviously broken Pokemon like Mega Kangaskhan, Mega Lucario as examples of Pokemon that were inarguably overpowered. And this is where you just deal with like the unstoppable ignorance and NPC hive mind behavior of the Smogon community. Right here, 2014, average sentiment. Maybe even majority sentiment. I've seen a lot of people refer to their own lack of difficulty with the Pokemon in question in considering whether or not it's ban-worthy. That should actually be a major consideration for ban-worthiness. That if a lot of people are struggling with the Pokemon and almost no one is having a lack of difficulty, then you have an argument for the Pokemon needing to be banned. But if half of the community, or 38%, isn't struggling with the Pokemon, then it seems like you don't have as big of a threat as you're making out. All this comment reads is skill issue. Problem with that is that when a Pokemon like Aegislash makes the metagame revolve around it, as it does, just more lies, just more nonsense. Source? Trust me, bro. Even though you can easily break down the arguments as to why the Pokemon was banned, and then as time went on, it just got proven that no, this is not how centralizing forces work, and we can see just far more centralizing or prevalent Pokemon not get banned, not get looked at, not get touched by Smogon, because all the ban logic is inconsistent, and it's just, well, I lose to it, therefore it needs to be banned. Which is why I'm against Smogon in the first place, because I saw that in Generation 4 where I went, wow, these kids are so bad, they banned Garchomp. It really is. Smogon just bans the Pokemon that make them look bad because skill issue. The standard by which a Pokemon is considered good becomes how well it can handle Aegislash. Even though a lot of Pokemon naturally handle Aegislash, and like I showed earlier on, you have a lot of Pokemon that also are not hard to team build with or around and can just be splashed in if it's that much of a problem. Do you want to win more Pokemon battles? Well, then follow the... Man, I have so many tabs open, it's hard to keep up. Well, then follow Smogon's own definition for skill to then build around threats. You develop the meta by making it unfriendly for the most common perceived threats. And then you have an evolving game, and then you're also developing your skill with better, more creative team building. Wow. The arguments I've been making all of Generation 9 hold up to 2014. Verlisify always right. And then people talk about auto loss and centralization stuff, but again, there's tons of Pokemon that are auto losses because you can't plan for everything, and it was just easier to sweep with anything back in the day. It's also weird that there were less bans in this overly snowbally metagame of Generation 6 compared to now in Generation 9, where it's kind of harder. It's just like more the severely frustrating power creep Pokemon that are making all the Smogon babies cry. So yeah, that's the rabbit hole. And I didn't even go into all the words and all the articles and even more of the posts. I just like touched on the realizations and how it all comes together and how wild all that stuff is. Oh man, and there's even more to talk about because the Aegislash unban vote also reveals a lot of the nonsense. It really is just NPCs wanting to be coddled, dude. The only Generation 6 suspect to propose dropping a Pokemon from Ubers. So Aegislash was that contentious, and then despite like all of these discussions about the post-Aegislash metagame, well, after Aegislash hadn't been around for a while, I was like, wait a second, have we developed enough for Aegislash? Do these new Oras Megas and move tutors actually make it harder for Aegislash? Is there more diversity now? Is the game playable? Or, you know, it's one of those things, like, you don't speak the boogeyman long enough, maybe start talking about it again. And one that was initially banned by a close margin, would community opinion still be mixed? In a word, no. Obey Smogon. We know better. We are right. So yeah, like, stayed uber with a 73% vote this time. Now, this is also when I was talking about my issues with the suspect test, that it doesn't get a large enough amount of players, that the system is so elitist, you only get the people that want the decision the most to partake in it. And a lot of people, it seemed like they actually wanted to defend Aegislash from being banned, which is why it was so close. But then Smogon, they just became ban happy, remove everything that makes me feel bad in the game. The problem is you have 100, 200 people voting on what affects tens or hundreds of thousands of players that get caught up in Smogon, whether they follow it or not, because that was another problem about this time, Generation 6 and a little before and a little after with Smogon, is that if you didn't play Smogon, you were getting in an argument. You would be bullied and berated by the Smogon player for playing the official rules. If you hosted a tournament that wasn't Smogon, you were going to get multiple people protesting the event, creating problems, arguments, and stuff like that, even though it's the unofficial casual format. So the decision is going to affect people outside of the Smogon community. And that's another thing, like where you're just playing Pokemon. It's like, yeah, I'm going to play and I'm going to use the Pokemon that are allowed officially. You pull out Aegislash and then they rage on you. And then you get bullied and attacked for being a scrub and a casual over an arbitrary decision where we barely had a questionable minority for the decision to occur in the first place. And the most interesting thing about this to me is that it shows the further crumbling of Smogon. To have this jump and also this sentiment be, no, it's not mixed anymore, Aegislash always should have been banned and it still deserves to be banned, that players stopped having it with Smogon. We even saw it in one of the articles that this dude was like, yo, it's so stupid that Aegislash was banned, I'm done with Smogon right now. And then immediate Mawile ban, a quick ban for Mega Salamence, and then the Greninja controversy. And then it just gets to the point where there's no argument for Smogon having any competitive integrity, and they're just trying to make the most casual, friendly format in Pokemon, and that's where the appeal is. But I was kind of calling that from the beginning because that was the direction Smogon was always heading in, and then we can kind of see like the collapse and a lot of people coming out of it. Now Smogon's just a joke, especially after Generation 9, especially after Generation 8. And that's another big sentiment about it, especially as people realize, like, oh yeah, there's more, like, official competitive support. 6v6 singles is a real thing with Battle Stadium rules. Freedom Cup, apparently that just got, like, buried. People were like, wait a second, Freedom Cup's actually enjoyable, and it's not the everything that is banned hellscape we thought it would be. Oh wait, that means Verlisify's right. Never mind, put that under the rug. Never happened. That experiment didn't happen. Smogon's still the best, even though all of our polls are negative towards Smogon. So just weird stuff. But Verlisify always right. However, I'm not getting my due or reparations or apologies or anything. Huh. What a dive. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.